Welcome to the Quick Stop F1 podcast. My name is Tasha, and you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that. It is Saturday, so that means it's the Saturday show, and today I have a guest on to help us understand some of the brake regulation updates that we saw last week and we talked about last week. Nash is out. He has some personal stuff, so it's just me and my guest. And before that, I do want to say thank you to everybody who has tuned in. If you're new here or if you've been here before, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. YouTube is so close to 5,000 subs. If you would like to give us a review on Apple or Spotify, we would absolutely appreciate that as well. 5-star reviews help us out a lot. And of course, if you want ad-free content, you can tune in on Patreon. So now I would like to introduce my guest. I have Molly Oxner. She is a motorsport engineer and content creator extraordinaire. Welcome to the show, Molly. How are you doing?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I am doing so good. I am super excited to be here and joining y'all and chatting tech. And when I saw you message me, I was like, oh gosh, these tweets have gone everywhere. I was like,
really have,
oh
though.
no. I was like, it's just a regulations update. So I'm super
Right.
excited to be here and I love to chat tech. And this kind of is like the perfect intersection of like, I talk about race cars professionally. I like to talk about race cars for fun. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited to chat with y'all.
I'm very excited to have you here. Like I said, we read your tweet out last week and we were like immediately Nasha was reading it on air, and just like as he was talking, I just felt my brain cells start to like, it's not that it was like complicated, but it's just sort of like one of those things where I feel like if you're not really ready to talk about asymmetric brake systems, it's just kind of
that's so true.
It just kind of, you're like, okay, yeah, let me wrap my head around this. But yeah, I'm so glad. What I like about the F1 and love about F1 community is like you can read somebody's tweet and then the next week you could just have them on the show and be talking with them. So
I love it. Yeah.
I'm so happy that you're here and that you can help us out. So I guess to kind of get started, does context matter around braking? Like for a lot of people who aren't necessarily technologically inclined as myself, does it make sense to understand like how the brakes work on the F1 cars before we talk about what the updates mean, or no?
Yes and no. I think the big piece of like context to understand is that you can brake front to back, which is called brake bias. And so bias is like where you lean. So I want more towards the front. That's a driver adjust. I want more towards the rear. That's kind of like the big piece of like extra braking context that's important here, because like brakes are brakes and they're regenerative braking kind of. So I think that's kind of easy, but understanding that that's not what this is. This is kind of an extra from that. So knowing it's more than just the front to back. And I think a lot of people, I mentioned it in my tweet, is like the brake magic that Mercedes has with this, like, I think it's the preset paddle at this point, or it's a button, and it'll push all of the bias one way or the other, largely for like warm up and everything. So that's different from this.
That's interesting. So what changed? What did the rules say before? And essentially, what did you report on? Because like you said, your tweet was everywhere. I kind of was in some forums and I saw it cited all over the place. So what exactly has everybody kind of interested in this piece of news?
So there wasn't anything about this previously. This was a new kind of passage added in 11.1 of the technical regulations that basically just says, do you want me to read this verbatim? Otherwise I won't.
Sure. Yeah.
Basically any system or mechanism which can produce systematically. So that's where the system does it itself. And I as a driver, as a team, I don't do anything, or intentionally. So button press, or the team actually does this in a setup, produce asymmetric braking torque for an axle is forbidden. And so what that means, and kind of out of regulation language, that means I cannot put something on my car that will make right front, left front, right rear, back rear per axle on the car. The front to back is still okay with the bias, but I can't have one or the other. And a lot of people will know this. It's called like vectoring. And vectoring is something that is allowed in Formula One with the torque mapping and the differential. But now we're not allowed to basically brake vector, if that makes sense, in a way outside of just front to back.
So basically left and right can be independently controlled, essentially. So how does, or can you elaborate even further on that? Would that be?
So Basically, what this would do would mean that I could apply my torque to one side or the other, braking
Mhm.
more than the other. And this is different from the differential operation. So, within the differential, if you listen to a lot of radios, you may hear like an entry call or a diff call, like diff 6, diff 5,
Right.
entry 3. The differential can be opened and closed hydraulically to allow one side of the rear wheels to spin faster than the other, or slower,
Gotcha.
or completely locked or unlocked.
Mhm.
And those modes are a map. There's a big matrix of what they are and what they'll produce for the
Right.
car. And so you're basically doing that, but with your brakes on left front to right front and rear
Right.
and all of that. And so basically, the unbraked wheel, if you were to put like all of your braking, say, on the left front,
Mhm.
the unbraked wheel will accelerate while the other wheel is the pivot point. And
Right.
it's not necessarily the speed, but the ratio of the torque between the two. And so, for anybody that doesn't know what torque is, if you ever pushed a revolving door, that's torque. Like, it's just
Right.
the effort to do something rotationally. And so, the total torque will remain split, but you have a better ability to control your performance.
Right.
Whereas with like the diff and the clutch, you're actively transferring the torque to the other wheel. So I'm losing the torque on the right and keeping it on the left. Whereas with braking, I can maintain the torque between the two wheels, basically. So it allows for better grip, is
Mm.
what it would equate to.
Right. So essentially, in terms of like producing better lap times, this could be significant.
This could really help in cornering performance because it would allow for some additional modes and some additional kind of cheeky kind of things you can do in a corner to help kind of go maybe dive deeper in a corner because you know you're going to have the grip with the balance change
Mhm.
that you're going to introduce, or there's different modes that you could play with, or if it's set up for that, if it's not even a driver toggle, if you're just set up biased that way to have this asymmetric torque, you just know that you're going to have that kind of stability and feel in the car, and it'll give the driver a like, hey, I know I can do this in a corner now. So
Right.
whether it's controlled or uncontrolled by the driver, it could be an added benefit specifically in cornering.
Right. So I think your tweet also kind of mentioned that there were some different options in terms of like how this regulation became updated. So either a team had already done it and
Mhm.
the FIA found out and told them to remove
Yes.
it. Maybe a team was interested in doing
Mhm.
this and
Yes.
FIA declined and basically was
Mhm.
like, no, you can't, and then updated it. So I guess in either case, like how significant is that? Because, in this kind of period in the regulations, teams are coming closer together in terms of
Yes.
performance. This could essentially, like you said, really improve grip, which a lot of teams
Mhm.
struggle with. So, in terms of like not allowing this to happen or be possible,
Mhm.
why would they say no, you can't do this versus just allowing everyone to explore this in terms
Yeah.
of yeah.
So there's a kind of like three main paths, and the big one that I always want to jump to, especially in cost cap era, to keep everybody mindful is like the cost of doing this, and
Right.
that's like a big thing. That's like the other side of DOS, right? Is the cost of developing this system.
Right.
So they could have said, this is so costly, and this is where like a team may have focused all of their development
Got it.
costs, and it's just not worth it at that point for the gains. But also that it's like a spirit of regulations thing. I always
Hmm.
say that if you're not cheating, you're not racing. And like people could come at me for that, but racing's a sport of cheating and loopholes and gray areas.
Right.
If you're not finding that extra edge, you're not racing. And so it could be that a team asked, or there's a lot of competitive intelligence. And this is where a lot of people took my tweet
Hmm.
and it went a little crazy where everybody started finger pointing. And competitive
Right.
intelligence is a big part of racing where you are watching everything your competitors are doing up and down the pit lane and looking for what's different, what might be getting them an advantage. And if you feel that that might be a gray area, going and trying to see if that truly is and asking the governing body. It's a lot of politics
Right.
and being like, hey, I saw them do this. I don't think that's okay. Can you please investigate or check this in scrutineering, whatever? They'll point it out and it'll
Hmm.
be obviously checked or looked into and basically go from there. And the other big thing is like, we don't know how this came up. We don't know, like you
Right.
said, a team could have just asked that they wanted to do this. And the FIA said nope. And they closed the loophole. It could have come up like that politically. It also could have just been like they found it in scrutineering because it's not like the FIA can't see your telemetry.
Right.
All of the telemetry and the data from the car is sent to the FIA and then sent back out to the teams. So it's not like they can't see these things. So they could have also seen it and done the check themselves. And the other kind of mysterious thing is why now at summer break that had
Right.
everybody kind of questioning this. We don't get to see the technical directives, unfortunately, unless they're leaked. So like last year when TD18 came out with the flexi wings and everybody was like, oh my gosh, TD18 flexi wings.
Right.
We were on TD39 at Imola, if that tells you like how early in the season that directive came in. And they count up. They start at 1 every year and they count up. So
Got
this
it.
could
Okay.
have been a technical directive that was put in at whatever point in the season when maybe a team asked, maybe it was in testing, maybe it was an early race. Like we don't know a lot of the pieces of this, but there's
Right.
something that triggered that to come in. And you don't basically put a regulation update or a rules update like that until you encounter it in a race. A team asks for it. You
Right.
find a team cheating or like somebody
Right.
brings it to the FIA's attention. And so it's just kind of interesting that it's right at this summer break point. So this very well could have been a technical directive that they said, we're going to close this off
Right.
at the next World Motorsports Council meeting. And that's how that happened. We don't know that, unfortunately, but it's typically there are steps and it's not just like a total knee-jerk reaction to close a loophole like that.
Right. That's so fascinating because I know, again, with your tweet, it kind of brought up a few team names. Red Bull was definitely the kind of top culprit. You know, at the beginning of the season at testing in Bahrain, like their car just looked phenomenal. Max easily won those like first couple of races. And then they've definitely seen like a huge like performance dip. Maybe I don't know if you would categorize it as that because I know there's some other teams that are raising their performance as well. So I don't know if it's just like kind of that convergence that everybody is kind of like talking about. But still, I think it's very noticeable that they're not just like running away with it. And so I think between that and this, everybody feels like they're putting together, you know, clues and solving this fake mystery of what happened to Red Bull. You know what I mean? But then on the other hand, you have like McLaren, like you mentioned, like other teams with, you know, kind of pointing out things that other teams might be doing. I know McLaren was accused by Red Bull of potentially doing something covering like a brake sensor, you know. So yeah, I guess in your opinion, I know it's kind of hard to tell. Like you said, like we don't really know why it's there or when this came down. But like, especially in your sort of like expertise, is there something that you can look for or that we can look for after summer break that might indicate, you know, a team lacking performance or gaining performance? Like, I'm just curious about how that...
I think it'll definitely start to be, you'll notice a team struggling for sure in cornering. They will probably complain about stability in cornering, whereas they may have looked more stable. That's what I'm going to look for personally.
Okay.
Is kind of driver feedback in the corners. And is there kind of a lot of like, hey, I don't like the cornering performance. And it's hard because there's so many cars that are currently struggling with that. But I'm still going to kind of look for increased feedback around like, hey, the car won't turn.
Right.
So that'll be like, it'll be more understeer would be what I would personally look for, because this would make a car more free or loose and want to turn, which is oversteer.
Right.
I use American terms. Nobody come for me. I work with NASCAR. It's loose and tight in my world. Okay. Right. So it'll make a car want to turn more rather than resistive to turning. I just smacked my mic. So I think a car that we do see maybe start to shift with some understeer will probably be that maybe might not have been understeer. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, this is Red Bull with Max's feedback. I am not saying that, okay? Do not take this out of context, please. You're going to see a car shift and struggle to find balance, and they'll be looking for ways to regain that with maybe it's an aero update or a package. If this has been in the pipeline for a while, they'll have known. Or is it just like we do see a true drop off after summer break now that this is kind of in and legal? The other thing is, though, too, if it was a technical directive, it could have already been in. So we could have seen this prior to summer break dip as well.
That's so interesting. Yeah, and I guess, like you said, sorry, buddy, I feel like I'm losing my voice. Okay. So if it gets like scratchy mid-sentence, I apologize. But yeah, so I think that to me is really interesting because, like you mentioned, we don't know. I mean, the first 12 races have been extremely interesting, to say the least, because where we thought people were going to be they aren't.
Yes.
Teams are obviously developing, and we're getting just like a big mix and shake up. So it's not like very straightforward. And so to your point where we don't know, when a technical directive might have come down, we don't know what teams are going to look like after the break. It is so hard to say. I was kind of like doing some research on this and I feel like one minute you feel like right? So like you can easily say, oh yeah, it was Red Bull. I mean, especially given like kind of their track record recently with finding the gray areas in the rules. You could easily say like it's them. But then I think just as easily you could say, well, if this type of asymmetric braking gives teams such an advantage, it could also potentially be teams that are suddenly doing better. So yeah, like you said, like I think
It's
over or after the break, so it's just going to be kind of one of those things. I think looking toward the last part of the season to sort of be eagle-eyed. I like that you mentioned like what you're going to be looking for, because I do feel like sometimes for me as a fan, there's so much going on that it is very hard to kind of hone in on like what technically is happening to these drivers. We hear the feedback or some of the feedback like on the radios, but I feel like unless you're like, really into listening to each driver radio and like the multi-screen and, even just like the telemetry, it's kind of hard to correlate like what you're hearing kind of like in the news to like what you're seeing in a race. So
yeah.
I do think that's an interesting
tip. The
tip.
broadcast does it too. I think the broadcast, like they talk about it every day. Right. So they assume you know what you talk about. I do this all the time too. I'm like, I assume that you know what I'm talking about because I talk about this every day.
Right.
And like that's not always the case. And so like when feedback comes up, or like when you hear like an iconic GP and Max conversation, you're like, but what does he want? Like, how does GP know what to do with that? Right. And it's kind of like, okay, the car won't turn. So GP is going to give him something, like this is just a good example, is going to give him something to help free the car up and make it turn better. Is it entry? Is it exit? Is it mid corner where like, so driving in, or are you already rotating? Or do you want better drive out? So it's kind of like it comes with time, but it's something I wish was done a little bit better, because it's it adds another layer. Kind of knowing that, and you're like, oh wait, like that's something's going on there. They don't like the setup. And there's so much going on, especially I feel like this season, because we say it on my other show, it's a challenge to be fast in Formula One. It's a harder challenge to stay fast in Formula One. And that I think is what we're seeing play out. And it's delightful. I would say.
I agree.
You have to get the speed, but it's even more of a challenge to stay ahead of your opponent. And so I think being able to like, and that's why I wish the broadcast did a better job of this personally, that like break that down a little bit more for listeners who maybe don't know or aren't into that, or don't talk about it every day, because it's such an exciting layer to know what that means, or that piece of feedback is, or what they're asking for, or hey, I noticed this lap time was bad because of XYZ. It looks like they're not rotating through a corner. I think there are some broadcasters that do a good job, but I think that that's kind of how I found my place in content, was realizing that there was a lot of that and nobody to make it easy.
Yeah. That's so, I mean, like, that's honestly like, I'm watching the Olympics right now. And I think that like, that's kind of, it relates a bit, because you just kind of dropped into these sports that you have probably not followed for years. And then, at first you're just enjoying it for the spectacle that it is, but then you start hearing the commentary and they start talking about like the minutia and the technique and, just different things that like really you start to then focus on. And then you're like, oh yeah, her foot wasn't pointed, when she, so it's like, I feel like that in Formula One sometimes too, because there is a lot to, going on that is really hard to kind of train yourself or train your eye to like, or your ear to like know and interpret like what you're seeing and like what you're hearing. So that's like such a great, I don't know. I feel like that's such a great point, and especially for content creation in this sport, because there's no way for everybody without a technical background to kind of like dive in without some sort of like, entry point, like you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. So that was like actually really helpful, because like I said, it's just, we hear about brake biases and all this stuff like every single race, but
like what is it though? Tell me what is
it? And also, like how does this create an advantage for a team or a driver? So that makes it really fascinating. And I definitely think, like you said, something to look into. when we come back
Yeah,
from
it's gonna be
break.
super interesting. I know. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see. It's Zandvoort first, right?
Yes, we're going back to
Okay,
Zim. Yeah.
yeah, that'll be a fun one. I think that'll be interesting with like the bank turn and that layout on that track. That'll be one. I think that
Yeah.
braking performance will be important for cornering. So
Right.
I'm intrigued.
Me too. Something else that I wanted to talk with you about, because this just came through. This is breaking news. This
Uh-oh.
is, yeah, right. There's always breaking news in Formula
I
One,
know.
right?
I'm
Every
I'm
2 business
tired.
days, right? But this one's a little bit more on the political side. And
Yes.
this has to do with Department of Justice, U.S. Department of
Yes.
Justice, basically moving forward with an investigation into
Mhm.
FOM/Liberty Media about whether they have violated U.S. antitrust laws. This has to do with their rejection of Andretti's bid
Mhm.
earlier this year. And it's basically escalating. So I don't know if you have first, like just an opinion in general on Andretti's bid into Formula One. Like, what have been your thoughts so far on like the process?
I do have some strong
Are you
opinions.
okay? Let me hear it. We love strong opinions.
I'm gonna try and keep this like as peaceful and not as hot take as possible. But I think if you look at the way that Ford came in with Red Bull
Mhm.
versus the way that Andretti has tried to come in versus with Cadillac, there's a big difference.
Right.
And I think that it's been a little guerrilla in the way that they've done it, which may have shocked some people. It is very American automaker, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's been a little guerrilla in its technique, and I think it may be contributing to their difficulties. Personally, that's
Right.
my personal opinion. This whole DOJ thing is super fascinating because I always
Yeah.
joke that like the US doesn't, and I'll censor myself here, the US doesn't F around with IRS and taxes and antitrust.
Yeah.
Like look at what they just rolled down on Google with the
Yeah.
antitrust law and the big lawsuit that they lost with antitrust. And
Yeah.
so this kind of gets in politically really interestingly because of the automakers that are involved and also Liberty Media. So you've got
Mhm.
FIA, which is separate from FOM, which is Liberty
Right.
Media. So FIA and FOM. And FOM is Liberty Media. And FIA said, yeah, we're cool with this or whatever. Like we like their application. It looks good.
Right.
And all of that. And then you've got FOM being like, yeah, no, never mind. We don't want to be given 11th piece of the pie.
Right.
And like, okay, whatever. That is what it is, right? It gets really interesting when you have a General Motors backed operation with Cadillac. That's an American automaker.
Mhm.
This is where this gets antitrust. You have Mercedes, you have Ferrari, you have Audi, you have Ford playing with Red Bull, you have Honda, you have these other European automakers that are saying you can't come play here
Right.
because of money. That's where the antitrust comes in.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think that there is a leg to stand on here. And
Absolutely.
This is really fascinating. And I'm going to be super interested to see how this plays out because I think that there is a genuine case here with the European automakers involved in this situation and them being like, yeah, we don't want that.
So on that note, there was a letter that was sent to Greg Maffei. I think it was like May 1st, and they gave him like 3 days to respond to it.
Yeah.
But I mean, significant is that it was a bipartisan committee. So, you know, if you know American politics, you know, to get any bipartisan support on anything is
humongous.
Huge.
So, I also think that the names that were on that were really fascinating.
Yeah.
They were
Jim Jordan.
Yeah, right.
I was like, what?
Like that one. Well, he's the chair of that committee,
Right.
so that made sense. But it was the representatives that are the district where Andretti's headquarters is, the General Motors headquarters in Detroit, the location of the General Motors facility in North Carolina. And it was like, it was full bipartisan, which shocked me.
Right.
I was like, whoa, this is
it's a big deal. Yeah.
And I think that this is Cadillac flexing a little bit.
Yeah.
And being like, don't mess with us, you know?
Yeah. So this letter was interesting because they had asked like 3 questions, and one of them kind of had to do with like to the point that you're making. So it says, how much did GM's, oh my God, my voice. Sorry, guys.
Oh, you're okay.
It says, how much did GM's and Andretti's entrance into racing competition taking a portion of the racing market share and GM's entry into the European market taking market share each play into the decision to deny admission to the Andretti global team, given the public outcry of incumbent Formula One teams against a new American competitor? So
Yeah.
to your point, they're basically saying you're trying to exclude an American manufacturer from the European market. And basically, you know, we don't agree with that. And being that Liberty Media is a US owned company, they have headquarters in, I think, Colorado.
Yes.
They do business in Miami, in Las Vegas. So they are under jurisdiction of US anti-compete and antitrust laws. So yeah, I definitely, for me, it's weird because it's like, I don't necessarily feel very strongly about Andretti getting denied, so to speak, in terms of like, if it made sense. But I think where Liberty kind of shot themselves in the foot was the reasoning, which was like, we don't think he'll add value. And just like it seemed like they already knew that they wanted to say no, and then had to like kind of reverse engineer the reasons why. And none of it made sense. And I guess like legally couldn't really stand up in court. And I think that's kind of where they shot themselves. I think the other place is that Greg Maffei, allegedly this happened at an event after Andretti went to Congress and spoke to Congress. I think it was reported that Domenicali, Maffei, and some other people were kind of sitting around, and you know, Stefano asked them like, "So, you know, how did your congressional, you know, hearing go?" And so he's talking about it, and apparently Greg says something to the effect of, "Let me read it out." It says,
"This is news to me."
Oh yeah, this is tea. That's why I'm like, this is like tea.
I'm so excited. I'm like,
this is like real. Something's really happening in the background. But he says that Maffei told him, "Mario, I want to tell you that I will do everything in my power to see that Michael never enters Formula One."
Oh my God.
So I think
that's tea.
Right. Like that's we are tea. Kind of in a situation where publicly you're saying that, you know, these are the alleged reasons why we don't want this 11th team, why we don't think Andretti would add value. But then privately, it's very much giving, this is like personal. This isn't really a business reason. So I think that there's a huge case. I mean, obviously, like you've mentioned, Google just lost their antitrust lawsuit against the US, and Google has a lot of money. Formula One doesn't have that same war chest.
Scale.
So
yeah. And we were talking before we recorded, there's also the other DOJ open investigation into Liberty Media. Everybody who doesn't know, Liberty Media also owns Ticketmaster. They also have stakes in things like Sirius XM, Irish Shank Racing. Like they have their hand in a lot of things. But they are under investigation for the Ticketmaster handling of the Taylor Swift Eras Tour. And it's the Swifties versus Greg Mafferty. Like they're already on the US's like shit list. I don't know if I can say shit list on this podcast. I'm so sorry. I did really good earlier.
This is probably one of the more casual F1 podcasts that you can say whatever you want.
Okay. So they're kind of already on this antitrust shit list for the happenings with Ticketmaster. And now they're out here doing more antitrust business. It's really like...
It's a pattern.
Yeah, it seems like it's a pattern, and I get it, but it's like everybody I think kind of saw it and said, "Is like, what do you mean that General Motors and Andretti aren't going to bring value to this sport? General Motors, look at their win record. Every sport they come into, they don't just come in and half-ass it. They come in, they have a facility, they have a good program, they have everything in place that they need to do it. And they're not just going to come in and ride around in 20th. They want to ride around in podium positions. So, and they have the power and the skill and the knowledge and the chops to do that. So anybody they partner with, it's not going to be a half-assed kind of operation, I would say.
All right. So technical difficulties. We definitely lost some of our conversation there, but I know, I guess just to end on this, I think it's just something interesting to sort of take note of. I think no matter where you kind of sit on the should he be allowed entry, not be allowed entry, I do think now that it's kind of in the hands of like the US government, I think it does kind of point to a very big pattern of behavior, especially for like Liberty Media and Greg Maffei of like, you know, possibly violating antitrust laws, anti-compete. And so, I don't know, moving forward, I think I would like to see more teams be able to enter Formula One. And I think the process should be more clear. Andretti, to his credit, you know, paid all the fees, did all the
He's
things.
jumped through every single
Every
hoop.
single hoop, yeah. So, I mean, for there to just be some, sort of like vague, we don't think you'll bring value. So, yeah, I think with like teams like Haas on the grid, you could definitely argue that there are teams that currently don't provide much value to Formula One and are benefiting.
I will say they're on the upswing, though. They're leveraging that
absolutely.
technical alliance with Ferrari
Yeah.
quite well.
Yeah,
But
Ayo Komatsu has definitely done something that I didn't think coming into the season that he would be able to do, especially given how sudden it was that we lose Gunther Steiner and Ayo kind of steps in, becomes this incredible leader for the team. They've been in the points most of the races. They're creating, I don't know, it's just like the trajectory of their team has definitely reversed very suddenly. And I mean, I guess we can sort of move into the mid-season stuff, because I did want to sort of ask you kind of where we started in Bahrain for testing to where we are now. Lots of stuff has happened. To your point about Haas, to their, turnaround. I didn't see that coming. I don't know if you did.
No, I love it though. I love to see a field converge. And this is like one of the things that I loved about NASCAR when they went to the new, it's now called the Gen 7 car. We were having a lot of issues similar to Formula One was actually. You couldn't pass. There were huge gaps. The racing product on track was really boring. They bring in this new car generation and now the field is all packed up and we have 20 winners in a season, which is like the most since I think like the 80s. Wow. It was wild. Yeah. It was absolutely crazy.
20 winners in a season? That would be insane. Logan Sargent winning a race?
Right?
Wow.
Right? All 20.
There was
an episode we did, I think on either Breaking Bias or E-Cubed, where I talked about how like, hey, this sounds real familiar, F1.
Right.
But it packed the cars up and I love having parity. I actually love seeing the competition field so close that you don't know.
Right.
Like you can see how strategy will play out, but like I'm still within 0.3 of the car in front of me and I could get up on them and pass them. Like there is a challenge for that stuff. And I love that. So I think that the mid-season where we're at, I've been quite delighted. And I said it earlier in the episode, Formula One is the challenge of being fast and staying fast. And we're seeing that play out right now in real time this season. We're seeing how hard Red Bulls work to stay fast. And now the challenge of staying fast with their car and being able to keep up with the fact that McLaren has gained on them, Mercedes has gained on them. They had Ferrari gaining on them, and the fact and how they handle that pressure and how they kind of deal with now having 4 teams pressuring them, 3 teams pressuring them at the front of the field. I think that it's really kind of the fun of Formula One. And it's super duper fun. And I can't wait to see, because obviously teams will bring stuff after break as well. I'm like excited to see kind of what's going on. I think we've had a lot of like, there's not a lot going on at the front of the field, which is where people are like, oh, this is boring. But there has actually still been a lot in the midfield. So I think that we've had exciting midfield stuff, but how do we get everybody still packed up in that parity there? And I'm really excited because I think that this is a season where we're seeing that. And I'm delighted by that. I love that. It's kind of like, how creative are you willing to get with your setups? What are you willing to try? And racing's a series. I come from the conventional automotive world. That's a very risk-averse engineering world where motorsports is like, you know what, we'll do it. We're going to put an untested setup out. We're just going to go for it. And so there's not a lot of risk aversion. And I love that. And so it's just, what are teams going to do and what are they willing to try? Are they going to push mileage? Are they going to try different setups? Are they going to get creative to try and keep the gap to their competitors in the championship? I think it's going to make for a really interesting kind of run to the championship.
Yeah, I mean, something for me, like you said, like I was not anticipating. We've had 7 different race winners.
We've had, I think, all 5 manufacturers in a top 5.
Right. Like I mean, you still have that gap. Verstappen, Norris, that driver championship gap is, I think, 78 points roughly.
I think so, yeah.
The constructors is much closer. I think there's just 42 points between Red Bull and McLaren. So that definitely feels like it's heating up. But yeah, if you would have told me like coming into this, especially the way that the Red Bull looked in testing, especially the way that it looked those first couple of races, if you would have said that we'd had 7 different race winners, You'd have both Ferrari drivers have won a race. Both McLaren drivers have won a race.
Like, what?
Oscar winning a sprint as well.
Yes.
You also have both Mercedes drivers winning a race, which I definitely, if you would have told me that, I would have been please.
What? Yeah. No way, right?
And then you have Red Bull, but Checo is the only one of the top 4 teams that hasn't won a race. So yeah, I think if you would have told me all of this coming into the season, I feel like I just wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah, same.
But this has definitely been what I've been hoping for and have been excited to see. It's just more competition, more fighting, more uncertainty. And so, yeah, for me, it's just been, in that sense, it's been a lot of fun to watch this season, even though there has been some.
I think a lot of people knee-jerked on like the gaps and everything. I think start of season and last year too, where it's like in the cost cap era, teams have to be so intentional with what they do. And we saw a bunch of teams bring different chassis this year to help with that. Teams have to be so intentional that not a lot of these changes can happen overnight like they could in the past, where it's like, I'm just going to go do this now and spend $300,000 on a new suspension or something. Like all of the research and all of the CFD and everything. They can't do that now. And so it takes time to, I think, kind of close the gaps. And I think we're seeing now everybody's starting to really tighten up at the front, not just the midfield now, which is fabulous racing.
Has there been like a moment that you've really enjoyed from the season so far?
I loved this last race. I think that the last race before a summer break at Hungary, it had everything. The strategy, like just there was drama, but just seeing everything play out like that was a race that I was like, this is a delight. Yeah. I'm loving this. Like we love a rain race, obviously, for unpredictability, but that was a quintessential for me. Like we had the strategy, we had the tire situation, we had cars, the drivers weren't really liking what they were doing. I think that race had a bit of everything. So far, I would say that race has been the highlight for me. And then like through and through at my core, like I've always been a Ferrari girl. Like that's my first memories of a sports car was a Ferrari when I was like younger. So it's like, I always have a soft spot for them. So I think seeing the Monaco curse broken was quite delightful.
Absolutely.
Because I always joke that like, look back when I think Charles was in like F3 or like Formula Renault. He posted a picture on his Instagram from the stands that was like, I should be racing, but I DNS'd, so I'm watching from the stands. Like that man has never finished at Monaco. So I love to see the curse get broken. That's a highlight, I would say. But I think that this last race before the break at Hungary, it was Hungary before the break, or was that
Spa?
Belgium?
Yeah, Spa.
Oh gosh, time is a flat circle.
We all know it.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about, though. Like, look, I'm in the middle of 2 race seasons too, so like, Hungary was probably my favorite.
Yeah, that's, I think, to your point about Charles and Monaco, I think that was definitely a highlight. Lewis Hamilton, obviously, winning Silverstone was insane, very cathartic.
Screaming, get in there, Lewis. I apologize to all of my neighbors. I was like, if you heard me yelling about Lewis Hamilton, I'm so sorry.
Listen, I think I didn't stop screaming, like genuinely for like 2 or 3 minutes. Like I just like yelling viscerally.
I was like, am I gonna cry? Yeah, I was like, am I gonna cry? I think I'm crying. Like
everybody. I mean, that was definitely, that was a great race. Got the energy in the season back. Like it definitely was unexpected. Like, you know, I always say if it's Lewis, I think he always has a shot, but
he does.
Still, it was a very unexpected win. And so, that for me was just a huge, huge highlight.
I was like, how is Max going to just fall like into this win somehow? Like, how is this going to play out? And we're going to get a Red Bull win here. I was waiting for the shoe to drop. I'm so conditioned. I'm like, something's going to play out. Like Hannah's playing 6D chess. Something's going to play out. And it's going to be a Red Bull win, which is like, fine. I get it. Like, I understand the brilliance of strategy, but I'm like, I need this. My soul needs this.
Everybody needed that. That was definitely, And I agree because I felt like that as well. And it's just like, we're so used to Max, like coming through the field, even when he's not starting on pole and, you know, there's the strategy isn't working out really well or the car's having, you know, like you hear it all the time. Like he just seems to not be having the best time, but like somehow he'll always kind of like pull it out, at the end. So for this, and he was close. Like I was getting 2021 flashbacks.
I was like,
I was like, oh no. But yeah, it's that's been nice to see Max fight a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
for race wins and in races in general. I mean, again, I think the whole season for me has been a highlight. I think it
I
kind
agree.
of, there has been a little bit of discourse amongst fans. Some fans think that maybe this season compares to 2021, which I feel like is its own thing. But I
Completely
mean,
different.
it has been entertaining at the very,
It has.
we can say that much. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I think that this has been a great season and this has
Yeah.
been super entertaining so far. And like I said, I'm so excited for this rundown to Abu Dhabi. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
extremely exciting.
Yeah. Is there anything maybe like, that you're looking forward to, or that maybe even just sort of, because I think you pay attention a lot to like teams upgrades and things like
Yes.
that. Is there anything that you're
That'll
kind of
be
looking forward to that's kind of piqued
I
your,
think that'll be kind of the big thing is what are teams bringing after the break? What's
yeah.
their kind of cadence and development cycle? Because a lot of the times it's like Silverstone and summer break. There's kind of these
Hmm.
benchmarks that teams like to have. And
Right.
so I think it's kind of understanding what's next for the teams. Like we're obviously going to see Monza spec, which I'm always very excited for. I think we've got clues about Monza spec. We've seen some
Hmm.
teams really start trimming out and scalloping out rear wings and different
Hmm.
things like that. And there's some kind of really interesting stuff going on with Red Bull and their specific like aero engine covers.
Yeah.
That's track specific, all of that kind of Coke bottle engine cover area. Like they'll change that based on the downforce package, like a
Right.
wing, which is fascinating. We see teams do it with cooling, but not with like the actual body covers like
Right.
that, which is cool. So I think who's got what after break and who's going to make a push after break is really what I'm going to look for. And then for me, I think Coda for the US
Yeah.
Grand Prix will actually be really interesting because a lot of people forget that code is such a great place to test pieces at in like FP1 or play with some stuff that you want to learn about because Coda
Hmm.
is the highlights of tracks from around the world. They took the best features of some of these tracks and said, we're going to make the ultimate racetrack
Hmm.
and put in features that are like the triple right-hander at Hungarong, the Senna S's, there's Maggots and Beckett's. There's all of this stuff that's kind of modeled after
Right.
other tracks in the world that you can use in your modeling to benchmark. So I think that that's a track that teams always show up with stuff like the slot gap separators that Mercedes
Yeah.
had 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
They brought that. I think it's a great track to kind of play with setups and try some stuff that teams are really intentionally trying to learn with. So I think that'll be a race that I'll be there too. So I'm like, ooh, what are you gonna
Nice.
have? Like,
Right.
that's what I always tend to look forward to because teams will take those kind of mini sectors and maybe
Yeah.
compare them to the model and try some stuff there because on track is your best resource.
Right.
And correlating on track to your model is what makes cars so good and so fast. If you have good in the computer, in the virtual, in the simulator versus on track correlation, you have the best possible shot of having a winning car.
Right.
How well you unpack the car with what you've modeled is really kind of a key to success in motorsports in general and a
Yeah.
really big one in F1. So I think that'll be a cool one to keep an eye on, I
Yeah.
would say. And then just the points gaps.
Yeah. I'm excited. Yeah,
I am
I
too.
agree. I really, I do agree with you because I do feel like, I mean, seeing some of the packages that were unsuccessful, I think Mercedes and
Yes.
Ferrari at some point both had to revert back to
Hmm.
previous specs to,
Yeah.
make their cars functional.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah. And
it's
are those specs going to come back? Like,
right. Are we? Yeah, exactly. I think like you mentioned Red Bull, I think somebody on their team had mentioned that they plan on changing the car basically every track that's left essentially. So they're like, whatever,
okay,
what do we have to
cool.
lose,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think to your point that I think McLaren had mentioned that they also have some plans as well, which is a little bit
Yeah.
scary considering how amazing their car
Oh my
already
God.
is.
I love that for
So
them. But yeah.
yeah, right.
I love it. I'm like, okay, like they put all this time and effort into this new wind tunnel. They've got the
Yeah.
trail. I'm like excited to see that. I think Alpine's got something coming, which like they need all the help they can get.
Yes.
I think V Carb's bringing something. Like I think everybody has said that they're going to be doing some work after the break.
Something.
So I'm
Yeah.
super excited.
Good. Well, we need it because if the end of the season matches the beginning, I think we're in
Yeah.
for a treat. And
Yeah, I think
yeah,
so.
I think tensions are rising too. The drivers are
Yes.
getting closer to get like, I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think we're seeing some scabs being picked at of like
yeah.
some wounds or some pain points that are
Right.
coming back to the surface with some teams
Yeah.
and stuff, which will be interesting to see if those fester or
Yeah.
get improved. So it'll be
Probably not.
interesting one to watch. Yeah. I think they'll just keep
McLaren, Zach Brown has been taking jabs all season at Red Bull, so I don't see that getting better anytime soon.
Yeah.
Mercedes trying to court Verstappen every 2 business days. I don't see that getting better anytime soon.
Oh man, it's like those memes where it's like, I should call him. Like just everything keeps to remind them, and they're just like, I should call Max.
Yeah, I should call. Exactly. Oh my God. And then you also have, you have Max rumors maybe to Mercedes, but then you also have Kimi Antonelli potentially being announced at Monza. Yeah. Like there's some sort of ceremonial handoff between Lewis and Kimi, whatever that means. And so, I just feel like,
oh my God.
It's a lot.
There's a lot
on track and off track. So it's been a fascinating season so far, and I feel like we have a lot more.
We knew silly season was going to be like a highlight of this season. And I think everybody was really looking forward to that because they didn't know what to expect with the on track product. And now we have this fabulous on track product this season, and all the off track politicking and the competitive intelligence drama. We are being so fed. This season is literally serving.
Love that. So Molly, before we go, because I feel like I could talk about this all day. I did want to kind of ask you about your background in motorsport, because you did mention, you kind of work in this field. And so I was just wondering, how did you fall into it? Did your social media have anything to kind of do with that? Because I know you're a big social media content creator. So how did you kind of gap the two together?
Yeah. So I was working in the road car side, and engineering was like never really on my radar. I thought cars were cool. I grew up around like a jack of all trades and was like, I don't really know if engineering's for me. I didn't think it was a path that I would pursue until a kind of like assembly at my school for the science classes on EVs really kind of ignited my passion for like, I want to do that. Right. And I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. And so that prompted me to actually go to school for engineering to work on electric vehicles. And like racing had always kind of been there. And like my aunt is a big Jimmy Johnson fan for anybody that's into NASCAR. And so it's kind of been there and never really piqued my interest. And this is where a lot of people don't realize I didn't fall into cars because I was wanting to work on race cars or wanting to work on cars or racing that way. I saw a BuzzFeed article in 2014 that was like 24 reasons why NASCAR drivers are the hottest athletes. Wow. And I thought a driver was hot. And I went and asked some friends who this was. And they said, oh, that's Dale Earnhardt Jr. And I'm going to own that. You should watch the race with us. Event. What? Oh my God.
Yeah. Not to interrupt your story, but I'm a photographer. And so we got to do a gig at NASCAR. Yeah. That was my first NASCAR race or my first in-person event for motorsports ever. So yeah, we were shooting. It was for like a brand that I can't remember the brand now, but on behalf of that brand, we were there. And so at the end of the race, Dale Earnhardt Jr. comes in and he's like doing a little meet and greet. And it was kind of fun. So we got to shoot with him and some other stuff. But
so fun.
It was a lot of fun though.
Yeah, I thought he was hot. First race I ever watched because my friends go watch this race with us, the Daytona 500s this weekend. Dale wins. And I'm hooked at that point. Yes. And so I'm a why child. I always have been like, why does it work like that? Why does it look like that? So engineering, natural fit, right? I'm like, I want to understand what makes these cars turn left so fast and why this is like a big deal. And so I dive into learning about NASCAR and kind of become like a big NASCAR defender. But that then led me down the path to, there's these ones that look like jet fighters. What are these? These are Indy cars. And like, I pick a driver because I have a type. I'm not going to name names. I have a type. And so I'm like, I guess I'm an IndyCar girl now. And then some other friends go, they race around the clock for 24 hours, right? Come watch this race with us. We do like a watch party, play games, 24 hours. Well, not. I find sports cars. Along the way, I find Formula One. I'm in college. I'm not waking up early, obviously, but I do remember Seb winning 2014. That was like my first championship, whatever. Yeah. And was like trying to learn about it, but was like, it's early. I'll like read about it and it'll be fine. And started to actually use motorsports as a way to help me with topics in school too. I was struggling with our fluids class, which is where they do like aerodynamics. And my professor goes, you like race cars. We're actually going to put this in race car terms and see if it helps you. And I was like, oh my God, brilliant. That makes so much sense. And so as I graduate and go into my career, I wind up working on EVs at an OEM in like powertrains, so like transmissions and stuff. I'm kind of like racing would be so cool to work in. Like I'd always seemed like I wanted to do it, but I didn't do Formula SAE in school. I didn't do any of like the avenues that would really kind of set me up for that. So it just seemed like this big unattainable boys club to me.
Right.
And on paper, if you look at me, I don't have a lot of the experience that would make me a desirable racing candidate. And so
Mhm.
as I started doing social media and doing this content, it became a little bit of like a living resume to say, hey, if
Right.
you look at my professional resume, I may not have like the Formula SAE. I may not have gone and done a motorsports master's at a school that offers it. I may not have some of this stuff, but I know my shit and I have like a good relationship with series. I know the stuff, I know the topics, I understand the cars and all of
Right.
that. I actually am a candidate that would make a good kind of
Right.
like fit or have a good fit there. And so it was kind of like, hey, I have the largest and only female founded technical education TikTok account. I have these podcasts. And so it
Yes.
actually did help me bridge the gap a
Right.
little bit where I could say, like, hey, like, I don't have it on paper, but like, you obviously are talking to me and you're getting to
Right.
know me. And you can see that I have the technical knowledge to do this. And so it actually did help me make the jump from road cars to my career in motorsports now, which is still a little scary and mind blowing.
Right.
But it's like, had I never saw that BuzzFeed article and found Dale Earnhardt Jr. hot,
Thank you, BuzzFeed.
I would not be here today. Thank you, BuzzFeed. Thank you, Dale. So I kind of have this weird and really unique path that brought me here. And it was kind of like, I just want to make the jump. My heart's in racing. Everybody knew
Right.
that was where my heart was. And so it was a weird, like, hey, I have this kind of living resume
I
that I
love
know
that.
this. And here I am. So
I love that. So, can you tell us a little bit more about because you call it tech talking, right?
I
Like
do.
you.
I do.
So
I
tell
love a
it.
pun.
Yeah, I do. Please, I feel like that's like a requirement
Oh,
for
yeah.
American citizenship
I
is you
hope
have
so.
to love a pun. But so I guess just to wrap up, like tell us a little bit more about your TikTok and the
Yes.
2 podcasts that you're a part of.
Yes. So I have a bunch of red flags. It's all one word because this race has so many red flags. I might try to date it, is how that came up. And it is just video content, kind of breaking down upgrades or random things that I'll see during a weekend, like to the part fail, what's going on. I have really been lazy there, but I'm trying to be better. I've been trying to do a lot of like motorsports engineering content as well, like a day in my life at the track and stuff, because I'm also the first woman in my job at my company, which is really cool. So
Congrats.
like I like to kind of highlight that and what it's
Yes.
like to be an engineer. So I'm doing a lot of that. And then that's on TikTok. And then on X, it's Molly underscore M or Molly M underscore O. And that's I'll do a lot of threads about different things or break down stuff. It's kind of the text version of the TikToks. And then I have 2 podcasts. I have Engines, EVs, and Espresso. We're on a little bit of a summer
Nice.
break, lovingly called E-Cubed. And we talk about cars, we talk about coffee, we talk about EVs, obviously
Nice.
a lot of the motorsports side. It is co-hosted by me and one of my best friends, Abby Rockshit. So she's the business mind, I'm the tech mind. We're 2 engineers. We come together and we have unhinged conversations about coffee and motorsports and kind of the business versus the tech, which is really
Right.
fun. And kind of relate that our big thing is like the road relevancy of how racing pipes into the automotive industry. Because like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't see that. And we're like, hey, this automotive news. And we're like, well, that actually connects back to what they're doing on the racetrack and stuff.
Right.
And then my other show is called Breaking Bias. And that is co-hosted by myself and Dr. Obbs, who is an aerodynamics PhD. And so that's purely motorsports tech. We think that tech has no bias. It's come listen, learn about racing. We talk a little bit about everything. We just actually did an episode on NHRA, which was really fun with one of the crew chiefs, which was
Nice.
a motorsport completely new to both of us. And we had an absolute blast and are the biggest drag
Right.
racing fans ever now. So we do not
Drag
just
racing is
Formula.
so cool.
Oh, it's fascinating. We do not just Formula One over there. So we do a little bit of everything. That's kind of the meat and potatoes is like the F1 season. But we
Mm-hmm.
try to kind of break the F1 bias a little bit and be like, hey,
Yeah.
like there's this kind of cool stuff going on, or there's this other motorsport's really cool, talking to experts from other series. So those are kind of the where you can find me's and what
Nice.
I do on the side outside of professional motorsports.
Well, thank you so much. You're awesome.
Oh my
Honestly, I
gosh,
could
thank you
talk to
guys.
you all day about
Ah,
everything because I feel like I just feel your enthusiasm for it. And I feel like if you're going to be a teacher or like educate people, having that passion like really matters because it helps people
mhm,
understand better and like really just wants to like, join you on your journey. So
mhm.
I hope you guys all check out what Molly has going on. Thank you if you made it this far, thank you so much for staying tuned in. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube. Again, we're like 200-ish subscribers away from 5,000, which is really exciting. Subscribe.
Yes, please. Subliminal messaging.
Right. Subscribe. ASMR.
quick stop ASMR.
That would be a lot. There's a lot of fun things that could actually be possible. But yeah, so thank you guys again for listening, spending your time with me, no matter what day you're listening to this. And we'll see you guys soon. I think Tuesday for another podcast. I think Nasha will be doing more daily news breakdowns. And then you'll see me on Saturdays, of course. And soon we'll have a race. So yeah. Thank you again for listening. And no matter what life throws at you, remember, keep it on the black stuff. Bye.
Look, mate, if you've got this far, clearly you like what we do. So here's a link to subscribe to the Quick Stop F1 family. Give that a click. And here's another link to some more cool on our channel. Sorry, cool stuff. And remember, no matter what happens, keep it on the black stuff. Click the stuff. Click the links. Click the links. Click the links. There. They're there.